Well, today on the show, we're joined by one of the few voices of reason that's left in Europe, member of the European Parliament, Christine Anderson. Now, while most EU leaders right now are sleepwalking the continent into disaster, Christine has been a fearless truth teller, calling out the authoritarian overreach, the erosion of democratic freedoms all across Europe, the insane proxy war with Russia, the collapse of the German economy, and so much more. So we've got a lot to talk about, and we're thrilled that member of European Parliament, Christine Anderson, joins us now. Nice to have you on the show, Madam Anderson. So great to actually finally meet you. We've been big fans here on our show for many, many years.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. I guess, I'm going to start with, I want to get into Europe. I want to talk about the German elections. I want to talk about all of that. But I think right now, top of mind for so many people is what is happening with Russia and Ukraine. We're hearing, of course, the United Kingdom seems to want to push further into war, boots on the ground inside of the UK. We know the posturing in France right now, wanting to send more money and weapons and preparing for war. Why does Europe seem hell-bent on trying to go to war directly with Russia?
That is a question I truly don't have an answer to. It's beyond me. But the war rhetoric that they're using right now, it's mind-boggling. And it just goes to show they're completely unhinged at this point. So they're talking about a coalition of the willing, right? Well, how about we're talking about a coalition of the capable? Because that's
Right.
the issue here, So, I mean, hearing Keir Starmer contemplating, putting boots on the ground and planes in the air. What planes is he talking about? And I mean, as far as Germany is concerned, what boots is he even talking about, right? So what Europe has been doing for the past decades is pretty much completely neglect our ability to defend ourselves. Not only have they neglected that completely, anyone, joining the army, whether it was in a setting where it was mandatory, so you had to serve like a specific amount of time, or it was a voluntary joining of the army. I mean, these young men, had been stigmatized as murderers or whatever. They were frowned upon, right? So, and who in their right mind would want to contribute to the capability of defending your country if you're being stigmatized for even thinking about it? And not only that, especially in Germany, I mean, we've been told for decades now we really ought to hate ourselves because of our past, which is absolutely despicable. I'm referring now to the Nazi era in Germany.
Right.
And we should never forget that. And we should definitely live up to our promise to never again and fight the beginnings. However, if you are teaching young children, you are not allowed to be proud of your country. You not only not that, you have to hate it. Why would anyone want to defend something you were taught to hate, right? So, and they're kind of like figuring that one out now. That might not have been the cleverest idea to have. And now they think, after having neglected it for decades, I mean, Germany is no longer capable of defending itself by no stretch of the imagination. And they think they can fix that in like 1 or 2 years. It is impossible. It is absolutely impossible. So that's the absurd situation we are in right now. And but like this war rhetoric, it is quite concerning. And on top of that, maybe going back to when Russia did invade Ukraine on February 25th in 2023, I think two it was. There was a consensus that we need to help Ukraine to defend itself, but it was a half-hearted decision. So what Germany did, now hold it, what Germany did to support Ukraine in the beginning was they sent 50,000, wait for it, helmets, used helmets at that, right? So in the beginning, there might have actually even been a chance to just end this right then and there. But it would have required a determined decision by the Western democracies, by the Western EU states, to actually do support Ukraine, right? And not with 50,000 helmets, but they didn't. So now, and they were convinced it's going to be over in like 2 or 3 months. And, you know, Ukraine has won and it's all good. But they didn't do anything to actually make that happen. And back then there would have been a chance, you know, the war is over and it was quite in the beginning. No one really knew how this was going to pan out. Yeah. Then Putin, he might have said, fine, we'll just stop it. I go back to Russia and, you know, you just have your country and we call it quits. But now they're expecting Putin to negotiate. Why should he? Right? We are now 3 years into the war. He does not have to negotiate. He
holds all the cards.
Anything.
Exactly. Right, he holds all the cards.
Why should he? But now they're like I said, they should have done so in the beginning when it started out, and then they probably would have parted ways, you know, with both countries intact. But now, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, like, hey, maybe you guys want to actually adhere to your side of the Minsk agreements that your former Chancellor Angela Merkel laughed about as never going to be enforced in the first place. Maybe that would have been a good starting place. And hey, by the way, stop carrying out a genocide in eastern Ukraine against ethnic Russians in Donbass, Luhansk, you know, in Donetsk for 10 years.
It's not just that. I mean, you know, this war, truth be told, this war did not start February 25th in 2022. This war, at the very latest, started in November 2014 with the events on the Maidan. So, and it's interesting to know what preceded that, right? Okay, so we are looking at Ukraine was supposed to join EU. And back then, there was a president, Tymoshenko. She was very much loved with the Ukrainian people. And she said, or came to realize, my people don't even want to join EU. So, and she was pretty much saying, look, Ukraine doesn't want to. So what then happened, they, you know, came up with trumped up charges against her, removed her from office. She was thrown in jail. Nothing was ever proven that she supposedly had done. But another one was implemented. That was Yanukovych. But Yanukovych, he also came to realize my people do not want to join EU. And he even told the leadership of the EU, look, we don't have to continue with these negotiation talks, accession talks, because my people don't want to. And that's when the Maidan happened, right? So we were told back then there were pro-Russian rebels shooting down people on the Maidan. We know nowadays it wasn't pro-Russian rebels. It was Ukrainian authorities shooting down their own people. That was a regime change.
Right.
So
a CIA helped.
Exactly.
A CIA helped regime change. Exactly.
Exactly. Because, and that's the thing. When I say they, I usually mean the globalitarian misanthropists. They will not take no for an answer. Ukraine was supposed to join EU, and they were hell-bent on making that happen. And here we are today. That's why we are in this fix today.
When you talk to the German people, because we get this Western media narrative that is plastered all over the place by the likes of Ursula von der Leyen, who tells us that Putin will not stop with eastern Ukraine, which is now part of Russia, that eastern Ukraine where they were carrying out a genocide for the past 10 years against ethnic Russians to secure that area. We've been hearing that Putin won't stop there, that he's going to move all the way across Europe. You know, he'll conquer Poland. He'll come down to Germany. That's what Putin wants. Of course, we've been saying on this show that that's a lie, but maybe you know something different. Like, do the German people actually believe that narrative from people like Ursula von der Leyen that Putin will not stop and he's coming for Berlin next?
Well, you know, what you have to understand, the fear of Russia is deeply rooted within Europe as a whole, and in Germany in particular. So, I mean, you know, we've lived through the Cold War. I'm a child of the Cold War. I grew up in that era. And yes, we were afraid, you know, that nuclear war might start. And there were a couple of instances we were like this close to it, right?
Right.
Luckily, it never actually came to that. So the fear of Russia is actually deeply rooted within in Germany. And that's why that actually works, right? But again,
interesting.
I mean, the Soviet Union is a whole other issue, right? I was afraid
Right.
of Soviet Union. They were a totalitarian state, right? Communists. I mean, any communist is totalitarian. So, and the way they just ran their country. I mean, my dad, they imprisoned him for 25 years of hard labor, right? What did he do? The only thing he did, he was like asking for freedom of speech, what it said in the constitution of GDR, right? So, well, speaking out against the system, against the communist regime, that didn't go down that well. So, unfortunately, he only had to serve 5 years of those 25. But nevertheless, so, but the situation now is different, right? So, and when you just look at it, I mean, the NATO in the 90s, up until the 90s, NATO was a defense organization, but they changed in the 90s. They changed their statutes, and, you know, and it became of a more aggressive nature. So it's no longer strictly a defensive organization. So, and what then happened is, once the reunification in Germany happened, there were guarantees made that NATO would not expand. But yet here we are. NATO kept expanding and kept expanding. And anyone who has at least an understanding of how mutual respect is working and how you should not, you know, back your opponent into a corner, he could have told you that Russia would never allow NATO to go into the very front yard of Russia, which is Ukraine, right? So there's been a lot of, how shall I put this? Like this expansion, never-ending expansion going on. And they pretty much backed Putin into a corner. And eventually this someone is gonna do whatever he can to stop it.
Yeah.
But I don't think, but I don't think that Putin is actually gonna waltz all over Europe. So that's just there.
He's got a massive, mostly unmanageable country as it is. He wants to add Germany to his. It just makes absolutely zero sense.
But I mean, you know, it only makes sense. But look at the state, the internal political states that the member states in the EU are in. There is mass protests, especially in the Eastern European countries, right? Everywhere. People no longer like EU because they see it for the hellhole it is. The undemocratic, anti-democratic hellhole it is. So when you are in a situation like that, where your power seems to just kind of fade away and you can no longer control it, what do? You pick a fight with someone. You go into war, right? That is like their last go-to before losing power within a country. We will go to war. And that's what unfortunately, that's what I'm seeing here.
So that's really fascinating. When we talked about the Nazis a little bit, are you seeing, and I've spoken to journalists who've received letters from the government for speaking out against the war in Ukraine, journalists in Germany who feel the need that they might have to leave Germany. I've seen this across Europe. We're seeing the clampdowns on free speech. We're seeing the restrictions on being able to transact in a currency, the amount of, in cash currency in the way that you want. we're seeing all sorts of clampdowns on personal freedoms and liberties, it seems, across Europe. Are you seeing similarities to what the socialists and the Nazi Party did in Germany to what's now happening more broadly across Europe?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. So, I mean, the mechanisms of totalitarianism are always the same. They're always the same. You need to silence people. And that, by the way, is the difference between a mere dictatorship and totalitarianism. A mere, in quotation marks, a mere dictatorship, a dictator, he is only concerned about to keep himself in power. And he will take whatever measures he needs to make that happen. But he doesn't care what you think of him. He does. You're not allowed to say it out loud. But what you think of him, he does not care. Just don't speak up about it. Totalitarianism, on the other hand, is a whole different ballgame. They need to control every aspect of every single citizen's life. And they need to control your thinking. That is the difference between dictatorship and totalitarianism. So, and what we're seeing is actually totalitarianism. They want to control your thinking, what you're saying. They lash out at anyone who is saying something different. And we've seen that especially in the COVID years. There were scientists that have been silenced and they lost their job. So there was all sorts of things happening, right? Look at all of the legislation around this whole transgender madness, right? In Germany, right, if you now dead name someone or use the wrong pronoun, you get actually fined 10,000 euros for doing so. Exactly. Right. So that is, that is totalitarian. So when I see someone in front of me and I see clearly that is a man, and I'm not allowed to say that, or I might even go to jail for it, right? Seriously? This is the stage we're at right now. We're talking about the Digital Services Act, which is censorship on social media. They're, of course, framing it as, we're against hate speech and we want to fight misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. So they're coming up with all sorts of things and reasons to silence you. And that is totalitarian, right? And by the way, I'm not quite, I don't know, are you familiar with what the differences are between dis, and malinformation?
I can't keep, it seems like everything switches on a daily basis. What is misinformation, malinformation, disinformation? I can't keep track of it. Maybe you can educate us.
Well, misinformation is wrong information, and you are distributing it by mistake. You don't know any better. You think it's true. That will be considered misinformation.
Okay.
Now we have disinformation. Disinformation is the conscious spreading of wrong information. You know better. You know it's not true, but you're spreading it anyway. An example for that would be like when all the governments pretty much around the world told everyone that these mRNA injections were safe and effective.
Right.
That was actually disinformation.
Right. We had the documents.
They knew better. Yes, exactly. They knew it's false. We now know it was neither safe nor effective, but they knew better and they spread it anyway. Now we're going to malinformation. And that's really the kicker now. Malinformation is factually true information, which is harmful. No, it's factually true information, but it is harmful. So an example for that would be...
And harmful to who? Can you clarify? Exactly, harmful to who? The powers, exactly, the powers that be?
Harmful to the politically desired narrative. So an example for malinformation would be if I said there is exactly two sexes, man and women. It's a factually true statement, but they deem it harmful. And as you already, to who is it harmful? And who decides what harmful information is? So, and that's what we are drifting into, the totalitarianism right now. And it's mind-boggling how so many people fail to see it.
Well, it seems intentional, and it's really deeply troubling. Friend of the show, Neil Oliver, I think he posted the other day, and my wife and I were commenting on it. He said something about how Europe has descended into a hellhole. And
Yes.
but the real question is, who's responsible and why? You know, why? Because it seems intentional. There's an intentional destruction
Yes.
of Europe happening. Now, I just moved from Europe. I lived there for 5 years. I lived in Portugal, and I was watching it happening in real time. The clampdowns on free speech, the inability for you to transact in the amount of euros that you'd like for cash transactions,
Yes.
the digital surveillance state that has emerged, the
Yes.
pushing of these mRNA vaccines, the censorship of websites. For us to do our job here at our show, we had to use VPN networks in order to go around the censorship, because Europe would block websites. So it's intentional. So I guess my question to you is, who's doing it, and what's their end goal in the destruction of Europe?
Good question. I don't know who's doing it. I really don't. I can tell you it's not Ursula von der Leyen. She is not making any decisions. It's not Bill Gates. It's not even Klaus Schwab, right? They're not the ones calling the shots, because they're the idiots that hang their face in the camera and advocate for all of this nonsense and this
Right.
totalitarian crap. So it's not them. But who it is, I really don't know. I have no idea. And I usually refer to them, for the lack of a better word, as the globalitarian misanthropists, right? So there is a group of people, I have no idea who they are, but they are the ones calling the shots. And our elected governments are mere puppets. They are just, pretty much implementing whatever they come up with. To what end and what their goal is, to me, it seems quite obvious. It is to ultimately erect a one world government and to transform our liberal, open, democratic, equal societies consisting of free individuals into some kind of a collectivism where the individual is becoming merely a malleable part that can be shuttled around any which way the globalitarian misanthropists need you to be shoveled around, right? So, but it's to ultimately erect a one world government. And that is, by the way, the reason the EU even exists, right?
Right.
So looking at Europe, we're living here on this rather small continent with so many different cultures, traditions, histories, languages even. And the European peoples are proud people. They are. You would have never been able to convince them to just surrender their national state and relinquish national sovereignty to a one world government. They would have never gone along with this. But since they pulled in the EU institutions, right, it's a stepping stone. So it's like, and it's under the pretext of, oh, we've been fighting so many wars on this continent, which is true. And we need to stop this. And the way to do it, we need to come together as Europe and as the EU institutions, right? It's just a stepping stone. So once they are relinquishing ever more competencies to the EU institutions, it's only a small step to then, okay, now we go to the one world government or whatever, right? So, but you need to condition the Europeans to be willing to do that. So
how do you do that? You do that through media? You do that through lies? Because when I lived there, I all of the media was propaganda. I mean,
Yes.
CNN, CNN Portugal, for instance, it's even, if you can imagine CNN in the United States, which is god awful, CNN Portugal might be the worst thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's literally like a propaganda news network, and that seems to be all across Europe. I don't recall sort of a burgeoning independent media scene in Europe at all. In fact, all of it seems like it's state controlled, and therefore that's how you get people to fall in line with this. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And you know what? It didn't always used to be this way. Like when I grew up in the 80s, you know, when you read different newspapers, you got different perspectives, right? So they covered the same story, but they may have highlighted different aspects of that story, or may have, you know, questioned a certain narrative in a different way, or come to different conclusions. So if you read a variety of newspapers, you were pretty well informed from all aspects of that issue. Now, it doesn't matter. You could read 100 newspapers a day. You read in every single newspaper the very same, down to the letter, the very same thing. We've seen it during the COVID madness. I mean, every news station had the same, even the same lines. Stay home, build back better, the vaccines are safe and effective, the pandemic of the unvaccinated. They were literally the same lines over and over and over again. They were reading from the same script. So there is no media pluralism in Europe anymore. You have some alternative media, right? So you kind of get that, but that's why I always tell people, you know, just turn off your freaking television set. It's dumbing you down. Turn it off. Just do it.
So
you're not learning anything from TV.
Where do the German people then come down? I mean, because it almost sounds like there needs to be a revolution. Is it going to happen at the ballot box? I mean, your party, the AfD party, came in second, which was, thrilling to watch that.
Yes.
The Alternative for Deutschland party to be able to say, we want to bring, German exceptionalism back. We want Germany to be Germany. We don't want it to be part of this globalist cabal in Brussels. And you had a huge turnout for that and came in second, which shocked the world. Can it happen at the ballot box, or are we going to see people in the streets?
Well, we are seeing people in the streets, having said that, but we do need the change at the ballot box. But at this point, so we came in second, as you rightly said. And but the supposer, or the one that dreams of becoming the next chancellor, Friedrich Merz, he is such an idiot because he committed, even during the campaign leading up to the election, he committed himself to never even speak to us, no matter the outcome of the election. By doing so, he pretty much gave the Social Democrats, the left and the Green, all the power. They're now literally blackmailing him. So what happened? So we came in second. So that the people voted for a Christian Democratic AfD coalition, right? We were the two strongest parties. And now you have like this 16% Social Democrat dictating to Friedrich Merz what they want in this coalition paper. And it started even earlier. Right after the election, they were looking at the election result and they said, well, wait a minute, we can't even change the constitution anymore with this newly elected Bundestag. So what they did, they called in the old Bundestag to have a change in the constitution. They needed 2/3 majority to vote to change the constitution. The newly elected Bundestag, however, AfD and the left would have actually had a blocking minority for that. So they called in the old Bundestag to change the constitution. To what end did they do that? So they can have what they call a special kind of asset, which of course is debt. So they voted on having this special asset, which is debt. and now wait for it, for up to 1.5 trillion euros. But they called in the old Bundestag to do it, right? So here we are. I don't see Friedrich Merz actually becoming chancellor, because, like I said, he gave all the power to the ones that were driven out of office, were kicked out of office, out of the government. He gave them all the power, and they will now dictate to him what the coalition agreement is going to say. So he's already screwed before he ever even became chancellor. He actually beat Angela Merkel. She was supposed to go down as the worst chancellor ever in history. Well, it's going to be him without ever even having been chancellor. Trust me. It's insane.
It seems like Germany is in real trouble. We've been watching it over the past few years, and the economy collapsing. Turns out when you turn off nuclear power plants and you allow the CIA and the United States to blow up your Nord Stream pipeline, that's not a good strategy for economic success. And
no,
you let the
not.
green, you get crazy green policy drive your country into the ground. Is Germany really in trouble?
Yeah, we are. And I mean, just what you just mentioned. So they shut down all the nuclear power plants, don't even care about critical infrastructure like Nord Stream 2, being bombed or whatever. But now they're dreaming of, building up our military and, getting all the defense back and all of that. That's ridiculous. Right. But going back to Nord Stream 2, that was actually quite telling. So once again, critical infrastructure, was just blown up just like that, right? Guess what the German government did?
I don't know. It seems like nothing. From watching it from afar, did they do anything?
They did exactly nothing. Not only did they do nothing, they couldn't have cared less. They were like, well, what's gone now? So why cry over spilled milk? That was their attitude. They didn't.
So now let's pay 3 times as much for natural gas and have it shipped on shipping containers.
Not only that,
to Germany.
Even better than that. So once Putin had invaded Ukraine, in the German government, they were so principled, right? They told Putin, hey, look, as a punishment, we are no longer taking your gas. We refuse to take your gas. Okay? Problem only was we were bound by contract. So we paid the gas, but refused to take it. Okay? So then what Putin did, he took the gas that we paid for, but refused to take, and sold it to, let's say, India. And then so he got paid twice for the very same gas. Then we said, hey guys, we heard you got a gas delivery. Can we buy it from you?
So you bought it from India?
Yes, we bought it. Yeah, it's insane. It really is insane. So we paid twice.
Before.
Putin got paid twice for it, right? And that was supposed to hurt Putin. Yeah, right.
You mentioned something, and I'll get you out of here, Madam Anderson, on the rearming of Europe. So you talked about the defense. So you shut down nuclear power plants. You're paying twice. You're paying twice to get the same natural gas you could have gotten from Russia. You've shut down manufacturing jobs are collapsing. The energy infrastructure is collapsing. They've outsourced their sovereignty to Brussels, essentially. But you mentioned defense. The buildup in Europe now is about defense. We heard Ursula von der Leyen a few weeks ago there with her little troll Zelensky on the red carpet, talking about the rearming of Europe, that this is what the plan will be, close to $1 trillion, if I'm not mistaken. I know they say like 800 billion, but it's always more than that, of course. So it'll be over $1 trillion. This is the plan, I guess, for Europe, is to build up the defense. This is how you will all be saved in Europe, is a massive buildup of defense. I guess preparing for what? World War III? I don't know what exactly.
To be quite honest, I don't know either. But once again, this to me seems to be another scheme to just get as much taxpayers' money as possible and funnel it into private, globally operating companies, just as it was with the despicable mRNA injections, right?
Right.
And to be quite honest, when you look up the definition of fascism, that's exactly what that is: the collaboration of government and big business to the detriment of the taxpayers, the regular people. That's what fascism is, and we've seen that through COVID, and we are seeing it once again now.
Member of European Parliament, Christine Anderson, thank you so much. I hope that when you're in the United States, you'll come by our studio. We'd love to have you. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
I would love to come by.
And we love the work that you do, being one of the few voices of reason there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'll take you up on that. I would love to come by.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.